How do you make good decisions? How do you know when a decision is right or best for you or something that will enable you to feel good about, that you've been thoughtful in it, that you can actually feel as though it's a decision that I'm comfortable with, that I can understand the consequences of, that I feel like is moving me in the direction that I want to move, or is helping me to understand exactly what's going to happen once that decision's made. I think it's a challenge sometimes to understand how to make good decisions. But let me give you some tips. The first thing is to understand, what are you deciding? What is actually being asked of you? Is your decision going to impact you temporarily? Just right this minute? The next hour? Over a day? Over a month? A year? A lifetime? I need to understand how that decision is going to impact me in terms of time in order to understand what kind of thought process might be necessary. What kind of depth do I need to go into in thinking about how to make a good decision? Another thing is how that decision will impact you or will make you feel over the time period. So it's not only whether the decision is going to last a certain amount of time, but it's how is that decision going to reflect on you? How will you be viewed as a result of that decision? Will it be a mature decision, an intelligent decision? Will it be a decision that, regardless of how it comes out, it will be productive for you? The key is to understand these dynamics, to be able to reflect upon these particular points that I'm making, and then to apply them to a given situation that will help you to say, you know what, I think I've made a reasoned decision. I think I've thought about that, and I feel as though I have good data to do that. The third thing is, what kind of data do I have? What is it that I'm going to be relying on in making that decision? Somebody's word, a document, something that is verifiable? What is it that I am going to be looking at or relying on or giving me the comfort that that kind of decision I'm going to make is based on some reasoned principle, is based on some set of facts which will enable me to make a good decision, to make a decision that I feel is thoughtful. In addition, I might also want to ask myself, well, do I have to make that decision now? Is there a detriment to taking more time to make the decision? And let me make sure we understand, I am not saying to procrastinate, but some decisions require more thought than other decisions. Perhaps you're writing a letter and it's in response to someone criticizing you, or it's in response to something somebody has said. And you want to make sure that it's a thoughtful response that gets across what your point is. Well, sometimes if you write it in a reactive sense, you might write it and then upon reflection might think, you know, if I had more time, I might not have written it that abrasively. I might not have said those words. I might have thought about it differently. I might not have written the letter. The key is to understand whether I need to make that decision. In that situation I used as the letter, you may want to write your response and then put it away. Come back to it a day, an hour, a week later, whatever the time period is, so that you can get a little time away and then come back with a fresh perspective. Sometimes that helps you. But the understanding that I'm trying to help you with here is just to know when that decision needs to be made. So, we have these criteria that we're looking at in order to make a good decision. Now, at first, when you try to apply these kinds of criteria, it can be unwieldy, difficult. I'm not really sure whether or not I can understand all the things I need to think about. Listen, it's not an exact science. The concept here is simply to get you into a thinking pattern, a thought process that enables you to say, when I make a decision, there is some thought that goes into that decision. There is some understanding of the consequences of that decision. There is some understanding of how that decision will impact me now and in the future. Or there is some impact that the decision will have on how people will view me. It's important to understand when you're making decisions that if I have the data, if I have the time to understand, if I have the ability to reason, the ability to understand the consequences, I'm probably going to make better decisions. So before you knee-jerk react, before you violently respond, before you begin defending, the important thing to understand is how that decision can be made where I'm comfortable, it's thoughtful, and I can appreciate what the impact of that decision will be. How do we apply these techniques? How do we make sure that we're engaging in some sort of productive analysis? The first thing is to understand that this so-called analysis, this thought process, this idea of how you're going to evaluate a particular opportunity, a particular decision, is not to be done in an analytical way. What do I mean by that? We don't look at every single opportunity or decision as something that is going to paralyze me. Oh my God, I might make the wrong decision. I have to think about this 57 ways. The more important thing to do is to think about, how do I develop a processing? How do I develop a mechanism that will allow me to productively synthesize all the facts I need in order to make a reasonably quick decision? Well, how I do that is I get myself into a thought process that starts with, I will not react. No matter what is said to me, I will not react. I will take a breath. I will think for a moment. I will make sure, does that comment, does that request, does that decision, does that action that I'm going to engage in require an absolute immediate thought, an immediate response, an immediate statement? Most of the time, that's not going to be the case. Most of the time, you're going to have a situation where you have some time to think about it, that you don't have to violently respond when someone says something to you, when someone asks you, what do you want to do? Or when you're making your own decision about what kind of career you're going to go into, or what kind of person that you're going to spend time with, or whether you like something or someone, or why someone did something and whether you want to do something about it. The key is, I'm going to start with a non-reactive, thoughtful, okay, I'm going to ingest that information. Okay, what just happened? Is it an event that I have to respond to? Has somebody asked me a question that I need to answer? Is it a decision that I need to make? That's not triggered by a question, but triggered by reality. Triggered by, I need to decide what major I'm going to have in college. I need to decide what I'm going to do tomorrow, or how I'm going to handle this set of facts, or these kinds of people. The important thing to understand is that what I'm doing is I'm engaging in some sort of time, thoughtful response. Not analytical, not dysfunctional, but rather productive. I just want to understand, okay, what's the benefits of this decision? How will this decision help me? How will this decision help those around me? Whether it's the person that's going to be affected, or whether it's other people that might eventually be touched by that. What are the drawbacks of that decision? What are the consequences? What might happen? What will reasonably happen? What could reasonably happen from that decision? I make a decision to do something. If it doesn't work out, what are the consequences? Well, the consequences may be severe, they may be short, they may be, extensive in some way. The most important thing to understand is that I've at least thought about what could happen. Now again, throughout this discussion, we're not talking about a paralysis of analysis. We're not talking about not making decisions. We're talking about making decisions. The purpose is not to create a reason for you not to make a decision. The purpose is to create some thought, some reason behind the actions that you take, the decisions you make, the way in which you approach a particular opportunity. So, if I'm making a career decision, I'm deciding whether or not I want to go into this field of study, deciding whether I want to take this job. How do I go about doing that? Well, I want to understand first, what's going to benefit me? That's not selfish. That's real. That's honest. I'm not saying that that's the only thing that I'm going to do, but I'm going to start with how I feel. Usually decisions made based on how you feel, based on how you think it will benefit you, are a great starting point. How it may harm you, what the short-term and long-term gain is. Jesus might be a problem now, but it'll be great later. The concept is that I want to start with, if I like it, if I think it's going to be productive, if I think it's going to help me, that's a good starting point. It's not the ending point, it's the starting point. So when I'm making decisions, I want to think about that concept of how do I think it benefits me? And I want to list those things. And sometimes, if you have time, you want to do that. What do I like about this career? I'm thinking about going into accounting. I'm thinking about going into nursing. I'm thinking about going into engineering. I'm thinking about going into some science. I'm thinking about going into math. What do I like about it? What is it that I like about what I'm doing? What is it that I think I will like about that? I write that down. Does the data support that? In other words, other people who have experienced that, do those people have that similar response? In other words, I think that math will be great because I love numbers. And I want to really make a lot of money. And I want to be a doctor, but I'm going to study math. Or I don't want to be a doctor, I want to be a mathematician. Well, if I want to make a lot of money, that may not be consistent with wanting to be a mathematician. If I'm not sure of the pay scales, I might want to look up and say, is that something that is important to me? If it's that important to me that I have to make a certain amount of money, then I have to take a look at, well, what's the data show the pay for a mathematician? Or what does the data show for careers based on a math degree, a math emphasis? And it's not important whether you think money's a lot or you don't think money's a lot or you're in it for the career. What's important is that you personally know what you want and that you evaluate that evidence and make a good decision. So what I mean is that I want to make sure that I've written down the things that I think are important. I like it because it tests my mind. I like it because I can figure out things. I like it because it takes time and I like to spend time on things. I like it because it's black and white. Whatever those situations are, I want to make sure that I've done some thought and said, okay, does what my belief have some support in reality? So if in reality people who are in that field engage in the same sort of love or have the same sorts of processes, then I'm much more likely to see that a decision that I make related to that might be more consistent, might be more productive. You see what I'm doing? What I'm doing is I'm just trying to verify. I'm just trying to say to myself, hey, I want to do this, but I want to make sure, because I may not be the genius at it, I may not be the expert at it yet because I haven't gone into it. What kind of impact will it have on me? Will what I think it will become actually become? I want to find out from people who experience that so I know that answer. By doing that, I can enable myself to make a more thoughtful decision.